Welcome, viewers. Just a few days now remain for the biggest global world leaders to begin flying into our national capital, New Delhi, as India hosts the G20 Leaders Summit. There have been a number of events, around 200 events hosted in India for various topical and thematic items, but this is the really big one. And in anticipation for that, we spoke to the G20 Chief Coordinator, one of India's senior-most diplomats, Harsh Vardhan Shringla. Take a look at this exclusive interview.
We are already in the final week going into the G20 Leaders Summit. It has been a tremendous experience, learning curve for India's diplomatic corps, as also, of course, for the rest of the nation to watch India on the Global Committee of Nations at the high table. As we go into the Leaders Summit, let's try to understand what have we seen all through this year of India G20 presidency with none other than Chief Coordinator of the G20 Secretariat, Mr. Harsh Vardhan Shringla, former Foreign Secretary of India as well. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Your lessons you have taken, the experience, and generally speaking, how has India handled the G20 presidency?
Well, when you talk about lessons and experience, they probably aren't that many because it's the first time we are hosting a G20 presidency. So there's no copybook that we can go by. But what is important is that we have started preparations well before we even began our presidency last year. We set up the Secretariat. We started planning and preparing for this eventuality. We consulted previous presidencies, Saudi Arabia, Italy, Indonesia. We got a lot of information and inputs from them. And but we were very clear right from the beginning that the Prime Minister's vision was to host an impeccable and uniquely Indian presidency. And that was our focus throughout. So as you've seen, I mean, our endeavor has been to not only make it a successful exercise in terms of the G20 itself, but to ensure that this is one that that involves all of our citizens, that this creates stakeholders at the grassroots levels, takes everybody along with that process. So it's been an inclusive and all-encompassing exercise from that point of view.
So if you could give one or two examples of the differentiator between India's presidency of G20 and the others.
Well, I think the first factor is that we have taken G20 to every part of our country. We are not only the largest democracy in the world, we are also the mother of democracy. So it's incumbent on us to ensure that when we host such an important exercise, that this is not a remote exercise handled by some people. It is an exercise that belongs to the entire country. And it's in that endeavor, I think, that the Prime Minister envisioned that the G20 meeting should be held in every state and every union territory of India. That means the length and breadth of India has been covered. Wherever we've hosted G20 meetings, the people of that area have been very, very integrally involved with that process through side events, a number of other Jan Bhagidari events around it. So, as I said, the endeavor has been to make every citizen a stakeholder in the process. And through the Jan Bhagidari process of involving students, involving quiz competitions, selfie competitions, festivals, take it to the grassroots levels.
Right.
So today when we talk about our logo, we talk about our theme of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, it is one that every person can identify with.
Right.
I mean, take our logo, for example. In the beginning, people used to ask us, can we use the logo for a certain conference, for a certain session? But after some time, it became so popular that it was seen all over the country. You know, you could see it in shopping malls. You could see it used by auto rickshaw drivers. We reached a situation where prominent companies approached us to use the logo in their products itself. So I think it has become a ubiquitous brand. It has become a brand.
Yeah.
G20 India has become a brand, not only in our country, but it's become an international brand.
Right.
And so what has been unique in our presidency, that was your question, is that we have made G20 a people's G20. We have certainly included cities of our country that have never hosted an international event before. So close to 60 cities have been hosts to G20 meetings. We've hosted close to 200 meetings so far. And I can safely say that many of the places that we traveled to arrange the meetings really had no experience of any major conferences, leave alone international conferences of this nature.
Right.
But they all put their best foot forward.
Right.
Whether it's states, whether it's union territories, municipalities, districts, everybody came forward.
Right.
It is the best example, in my view, as someone who organized it on the ground, of cooperative federalism.
All right. So any numbers to back up the People's Presidency, like how many students were involved, universities, campuses, municipalities, something like that? And
so
also, when you say it traveled across the country, was it without any bias to which state has which government in power?
So, yes, that's an important point, that every state, irrespective of their political affiliations, was the host of one G20 meeting or the other. And every state, whether they were affiliated with the government or were in opposition, came forward in a manner that, as I said, they wanted to use the opportunity to put the best of their country and the best of that state to the international delegates who were coming. And we got fullest cooperation from every state in India. You would recall that Prime Minister had, as soon as we took over the presidency, addressed the governors and chief ministers of states.
Right.
And at that time, he said, this is a unique opportunity for you to showcase the best in terms of our cultural heritage and diversity. And so it's for states to provide the support necessary. And I can tell you, having traveled to a very large number of states to meet the concerned stakeholders, chief ministers, chief secretaries, officials, others, I think we received the fullest support and cooperation.
Right.
And without that cooperation in our federal structure, we could never have made this presidency such a successful one.
Right. Since it's a diplomatic exercise, there has been subtle diplomatic messaging also involved. For example, holding an event in Srinagar in Kashmir or Arunachal Pradesh. How was it seen by the rest of the membership of G20?
So take Srinagar, for example. I think we had excellent turnout and participation of the international delegates. There were actually 5 UN organizations that attended that meeting. The UN itself, the UN World Tourism Organization, UNEP. So you had a plethora of UN agencies that came. I think, were able to get a very large participation, not only from within our stakeholders within the country, but also internationally, as I said. And it was very greatly appreciated by the people of Jammu and Kashmir themselves, who realized that this was a unique opportunity for them.
Yeah.
And many people also commented that they had never, ever seen an international event of this nature. This is the largest event ever hosted in Srinagar in their history. And I think people also associated it with many of the positive changes in the urban sector. There was an urban transformation. It was a smart city. The Jhelum riverfront was completely redone. The Dal Lake was cleaned. The entire area was absolutely beautiful. And I had been there 6 months before that, and I've seen the changes that have been brought in. And these changes will stay well beyond the G20. So
right.
they're changes that will be there to stay.
Right.
And so people said, let's have more of such events. Let's have more G20 events in Srinagar. And I think so. It was a game changer in many senses.
Arunachal as well?
Arunachal as well. I think right from the chief minister down to every person was associated. All of the cultural diversity of Arunachal Pradesh was there for our visitors and guests to see. It was a fascinating glimpse into a part of our country that unfortunately not enough of us have been to.
Right. So if you have to mark out 2 things which rest of the world, while observing India's G20 presidency, can look at important takeaways.
Well, I think first and foremost, our philosophical vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Right.
One earth, one family, one future. The entire premise rests not only from ancient times, where we use this concept to engage holistically with the rest of the world, but also in today's context, the philosophy drives our foreign policy, drives our external engagement.
Yeah.
So when we talk about working for the global common good, we are the pharmacy of the world. During COVID times, we provide medicines to the rest of the world. We provided under Vaccine Maitri Indian-made vaccines to the rest of the world. we are also providing our expertise and experience in digital public infrastructure, India Stack, for example, renewable energy
Yes.
through the International Solar Alliance and the CDRI. Now, when we look at that, I think we are very conscious of the fact that we work towards the global common good. So that concept, and I'll digress for just a second.
Yeah.
When the Saudi Arabians hosted a summit, an extraordinary summit during COVID, and Prime Minister had asked and initiated that process. In that meeting, he actually said that this is the first time that the G20 is meeting on an issue that's neither economic nor financial.
Yeah.
It's meeting on a humanitarian issue.
Yes.
And he called for a human-centric globalization.
Right.
And that philosophy is there to stay. Under our presidency, for the first time, developed and developing countries have come together to work to create solutions for global challenges.
Right.
That we are seeing the beginning of a new global order, which is based on a process of global collaboration.
Right. We have had this peculiar situation where even the use of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam has been objected to, but I'll not get into that. My second last question, was it a sort of a logistics nightmare, if not a nightmare, a challenge to be holding this scale of event for the first time perhaps in our country? And also the G20 summit, for example, we did not have a convention center matching the requirements, and then we got one, and getting all these leaders, heads of state, heads of government, accommodating them and their delegations. We heard that President Biden perhaps is coming with 3 plane loads of his team. How was that experience?
So, as I said, planning started well before we took on the presidency. And that is why today we can sit back and say with a measure of confidence that we will have a summit that will be absolutely extraordinary. But the process in leading up to the summit has also been quite interesting from the point of view that we have broken new ground. We have gone, as I said, from Kutch to Kohima, and we've gone to all parts of our country. So from that perspective, I think working with local authorities to create infrastructure, to encourage urban transformations, beautifications, also capacity, enhancing capacity for the requirements of the G20. And all of this is, as I said, for a good cause beyond the G20, because many of these cities today have the confidence and the capacity to host major conferences and MICE events. It has boosted tourism. It has showcased our developmental and cultural heritage capacities. And I think it has done a world of good to us as a country. And so I would say that if there were any challenges in the process, they were worth surmounting.
Like any anecdote on this Bharat Mandapam, how you went about it thinking that we need a convention center which is needed immediately for G20 and then should be available for India's diplomatic engagements later as well.
So here there was a lot of foresight, because the construction of Bharat Mandapam started years ago and predates my time both in the MEA and in this current position. I think it started with the realization that we will host the G20 presidency. We need a new convention center because we don't have those capacities that are required for such an important international event, but also for the future. As the Prime Minister said when he inaugurated the Bharat Mandapam, that in our capital city we now have the capacity to hold major conferences, and this will hold us in very good stead in the future. So Bharat Mandapam, I think, is a matter of pride for all Indians, that it is a state-of-art convention center. It is also linked to a number of ancillary facilities, and all of them have been upgraded substantially for the G20.
Right. My last question to the diplomat in you. With this talk that President Jinping might not be coming, does it impact outcome of the main summit in any manner, or we are fine?
First of all, I think the question is speculative because we don't know. And I don't know for certain who's coming and who's not coming. And whether at all that issue is established, I'm not sure. But what is important is that we would have the heads of state and government and important leaders of all of our G20 partner countries, invitee countries, and international organizations. It would be an unprecedented gathering of the most influential and important world leaders in our country. It's a very unique opportunity for us. And certainly we will put it to the best use. And the summit will be an extraordinary summit in keeping with our expectations of an impeccable and uniquely Indian
Right.
G20.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Shringla, for joining us on this special broadcast.